Welcome you all to Las Vegas. I hope so far it's been an easy entrance and already you've had some good connections and conversations with everybody here, and we look forward to you having a couple of days of successful meetings. My name is Adina Renee Adler. I am Senior Director for Government Relations and International Affairs at ISRI. In that role, I've had a chance to meet a lot of you, and that's a good reminder. Please turn off your ringers. Right now, everybody, take out your phones and check to make sure your ringers are off. I'm okay with vibrate. I'm okay with silence. We understand you're here to do business. It's okay. If you do get a phone call, if you could just take it to the back, that would be great. We don't want to be distracting to our speakers here. We really greatly appreciate that. Anyway, I've had a chance, just a fortuitous chance to talk with a lot of you about what's going on in your business and especially how China has been impactful for you. And I look forward to meeting more of you. In my role is that I'm responsible for the work of international trade and helping to develop markets and trying to track what's going on in markets around the world. And so China has been certainly a high priority on my portfolio, and I have done the best that I can to keep you all, especially our members, informed of what's going on. And if you're not a member, then you're missing out on the emails that I've been sending out about just developments in China, with China, policy statements that are happening by other governments in the United States, Europe, and around the world about what's happening, and interesting business development opportunities in India and all that stuff. As a member, you'd have access to all of that information. And if there's any way that I can help you think through a potential membership, please let me know. And for those of you who are members, of course, warm welcome to you. And I hope that all the information that I and my colleagues have been pushing out to you of late has been helpful to you. So before I turn to our discussion, I do want to note that the purpose of this session is to discuss the regulatory environment in China in terms of your ability to do business with China, in terms of the ban and the import standards and all of that. We are not going to get into a discussion about the exchange of tariffs between the U.S. and Chinese governments. That conversation is going to take place in the aluminum spotlight and the copper spotlight and the ferrous spotlight because they are so more directly relevant to those commodities. And so we thought it would be a little bit more productive to have that conversation when the room is filled with people who are really directly impacted. We really want to stay focused on the regulatory environment because that is still so important. Also, on Thursday morning, we are going to have another session focused on trade, but instead of China, we're going to focus on what's happening in scrap markets in other regions of the world. So we will have speakers to talk about Europe, India, the Middle East, Latin America, and Australasia, like Australia, New Zealand. So please come back if you're looking and thinking about, I don't have China as an option anymore, or I just want to think about diversifying my portfolio. I wonder where else I could look for customers. Come back on Thursday morning because that's where we're going to have that discussion. Also, I just want to give a shout out on Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. We're going to have a special session called Music Recycle, where we're going to find a way to unify the music industry with the recycling industry so that we can get the power of our industry messages out far and wide. And I encourage you to join us for that session. I think it'll be really interesting. We're going to have representatives of the Berkeley School of Music in Boston, as well as music producers from Hollywood coming and just trying to think about how can we tell the world about the benefits of recycling and the impact that recycled materials and scrap have to the world. So please join us for that. Okay, I'm going to do a very quick overview to remind everybody, just do a little context setting. what's going on in China, and then I will introduce our panelists, and then I will let them give you the real practical information. And it is my hope that you come out of this session not saying, oh, it's the same information over and over again. It's, hey, you know, I hadn't thought about that. That's really interesting. Hopefully this will be a good session for you. So the title, of course, is Game Changer, and we do feel that there is a trend now that I think had already started probably within the last few years about thinking about where the future of the recycling industry is going, and the focus on higher quality materials. But I think the policies in China just sort of reminded us that, okay, that future actually has to start now. And so that's why we call this session Game Changer, and it is, you know, sort of changing the paradigm of our industry. So quick context, level set. You see pictures of, you know, of coming out of China all the time. The air quality is terrible. You do see the pictures of waste and rubbish, not recycled materials, but rubbish, unfortunately polluting the waterways and the land. And President Xi Jinping has, you heard Secretary Gutierrez mention it this morning, he's got 3 priorities on his mind, and the environment is very much a part of that. And so they are looking at how they can really improve the whole gamut of their environment. And part of that, of course, is thinking about solid waste management. They recognize that they have some things that they need to fix within their own domestic system, but, you know, seeing documentaries and hearing anecdotes also has put into their minds that the term in Chinese that is used, that translates loosely as waste, but also refers to scrap, is something that they feel that they need to start clamping down on imports. And so they have a multi-pronged strategy to think about how to improve recycling and to improve their solid waste management, all from the prohibition that we saw announced last July that went into effect in January of the categories that included mixed paper and post-consumer plastic. They do intend to continue to close their markets to imports of recyclable materials that they feel that they can replace with their own domestic resources. Of course, they've imposed these mandatory carried waste thresholds as a way to improve the quality, but also to keep out what they believe is unusable rubbish. They do continue to do strong enforcement at the borders. National Sword started last year, has continued into this year, is about clamping down on illegal trade of rubbish. They also have this Blue Sky initiative, and that's about implementing and making sure that there's no illegal trade of the banned materials. They will continue to refine their laws and regulations. That's where we see the use of the import licensing system, of course, to minimize and kind of clamp down on the amount of scrap material that can come into China. And then, of course, they are ramping up and putting a lot of financing behind the development of their own domestic recycling capabilities. They do see recyclables as a strategic asset because it can not only feed into their manufacturing sector, but that's material. Those are resources that they don't have to go mining for in their lands. This is a chart we use for every presentation that we give. This is why China is so important to the recycling industry, not just the US recycling industry, but the global industry. Because and I apologize we don't have more recent data, but this is what's available to us at the moment. In 2016, this is how much China took in or I should say, of the total amount of materials that are recycled in the world. This is how much China consumes. It's a lot. The figures on the right are 2017 data, and you can see that China still continues to be the US's largest export market. We produce about 130 million metric tons of recyclable materials in the United States, and still anywhere between 30 and 40% goes to China alone. And we did actually have an uptick, even despite with all the policies, we did have a slight uptick in exports in 2017 over the previous year. Our biggest challenges with these policies, there's many more actually that probably I don't have listed on this slide, but really it's the challenges for the industry is being able to, of course, meet those strict quality standards. We're facing challenges at the ports. They still have a double inspection system where, as you know, you have to have them pre-inspected before it leaves. I think the vast majority of our companies are able to get those pre-inspection certificates only to encounter an official at the port who maybe doesn't fully understand the nature of the material and then rejects the material, and you are unfortunately have to pay for bringing it back. And we just see this across the board, and we do see it across all the materials. It's not just paper and plastic, but in the metal side as well. And we do see there is a trend that is beginning that you are going to start to see some market competition of Chinese scrap commodities being exported into the world. It's very small right now, but it is going to begin to grow. We also know that they are putting a lot of financing behind research and development for equipment. So they are, any equipment providers in the room, they're going to potentially stop buying your equipment, develop their own, and then also push that out into the marketplace. That's something that we're going to have to watch very carefully. But as a result, of course, we're seeing stockpiling at the MRFs. So in a policy that was intended to protect the environment from imported rubbish, instead means perfectly high quality recyclable materials are going to landfills. Their manufacturers are using more prime material now, which of course uses more energy and expends more greenhouse gas emissions than the use of scrap. We know that our companies are out there looking for new markets. We do see some growth here in North America as well as in other regions, and we'll discuss that in our session on Thursday. I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but just one main misconception, two main misconceptions that I want to mention. One is the original import policies. I still maintain we're not in retaliation for the Trump administration's policy on China, going back to his first days in office in early 2016, because these are policies that apply to scrap no matter where they come from in the world. The exchange of tariffs is a different matter, and as I said, we'll talk about those in the commodity spotlights later today. Also, I just want to be very clear. I know it's so easy to try to find a catchword. Most, the press, some people, like to say, well, this whole thing is National Sword. No, National Sword is about keeping the trash, the rubbish out. You guys don't produce rubbish. You produce high-quality scrap commodities, and that does not come under what they have deemed as National Sword. And so our problem is that these policies have put a kink into the global supply chain and the legitimate trade of your high-value materials. So just really quickly, this is probably a message more for the non-members. If you'd like to sign up, this is what you're missing out. We've been doing a tremendous amount of outreach and work and building coalitions and building support for you as we try to navigate these issues, trying to find ways that we can either push back or maybe find opportunities to collaborate. In particular, the U.S.-China engagement, it has its ups and downs, but all of the agencies within the U.S. government and on Capitol Hill are fully briefed on this issue. They want to be helpful. They can be helpful. They do take it up at the World Trade Organization on our behalf. Secretary Gutierrez also mentioned one of his recommendations to you is if you're looking to develop business in markets, no matter where they are in the world, the U.S. government has a network called the U.S. Commercial Service of officers in many countries around the world that will work with you to find customers and to find business opportunities. And my role at ISRI is to hook you up with them. So members who want to take him up on that suggestion can certainly reach out to me, and I'm happy to facilitate that. I used to work for them, so I know them well. Also, of course, we partner with organizations in the United States, SWANA, NWRA, Keep America Beautiful, the Recycling Partnership, a whole host of organizations here in the United States, as well as our global network, the Bureau of International Recycling, our European counterparts based in Brussels, our Canadian counterparts, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, just Japan, India. We work very closely with them because the more that the message is not just an American message, it's a global message, we can have that resonate back to China. Of course, we have a lot of direct engagement with the Chinese. ISRI is the only organization worldwide that has a regular and sustained dialogue with the Chinese government, full stop. Only ISRI and BIR have been to China in the last 16 months to engage with the government regularly, and ISRI President Robin Wiener and I will leave ISRI convention, kiss our families, do our laundry, and we're getting on a plane on Sunday and going back to Beijing because we have to continue to engage with them, and we're doing that for our members. And also, we've been all over the media, and we've given speeches in the thought leadership space because it is important that the world understands you're not dumping trash in China. You are trading high-value commodities with them, and so we try to get that out. Okay, I'm done talking. I need a drink of water. So I'm going to turn it over to our fabulous panelists who have kindly given their time out from the showroom floor to talk with you about their experiences. On my immediate right, we're going to start with Chad Hansen, who's the National Sales Manager for Sea-Link International, a leading international logistics provider. We will hear firsthand knowledge on how China's changing market has impacted scrap trade. And then we're going to hear from Shen, who is the Director of International Marketing for Omnisource Corporation, a wholly owned subsidiary of Steel Dynamics. Shen will also begin, starting on Thursday, a 2-year term as Vice Chair of the ISRI Trade Committee, and so I really look forward to working with Shen in that capacity. And he's going to give us a sense of what he's hearing also in China and in the marketplace. And then we're going to turn to Vinod Singh, who has risen through the ranks over a 28-year career with Far West Recycling, and he's now outreach manager for this Oregon-based company. They are Oregon's largest recycling processor and marketer, and Vinod will share some of the proactive ways his company is confronting today's market challenges. And finally, but certainly not least, is Steve Gilbert, who is a 4th-generation scrap metal dealer and now general manager for North Carolina-based woman-owned Queen City Metal. Steve has some really good insights into scrap metal trade in China and around Asia. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chad. I'm just going to leave this up as a background.
Okay. Get out of your way here. Hey, good morning, everybody. As Dina mentioned, my name is Chad Hansen. I work with Sea-Link International, National Sales Manager there. We are a full-service logistics provider, imports, exports, domestic trucking, but our primary specialty is exporting of metal scrap, waste paper, and plastic scrap from the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Currently, we are exporting between 5,000 and 6,000 containers per month of these commodities. So the past year, I've been able to get a really good picture of the transition and the fluidity of this thing. I'm not going to sugarcoat this thing. This thing it's in extremely difficult times. It's a very pivotal point, I believe, in international shipping today from the United States into China and these other markets with these commodities. I haven't prepared a slide deck because I don't think past trends would really matter at this point, nor would I be able to forecast any sort of future, what's going to happen with this. That's how much this stuff is moving. A few years ago, if you'd have told me at some point in time that you would not be able to ship plastic scrap, waste paper, and metal scrap into China, I probably would have called the Lunacy Commission because, that would have been unheard of. But the reality is it's here, and it's upon us, and it's today. I'm going to discuss briefly kind of about the 3 main commodities that we are exporting, and I'm going to start with the ugliest of them all, and that's plastic scrap. China's done, Vietnam is done. What I'm seeing right now are containers going into Malaysia, to Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, some Spain and some Portugal. You know, the difficulties, though, with plastic scrap is just getting a booking. I have a team, an army of guys that try all day long to work with these carriers just to get one booking today. You know, I would say the average turnaround time for, well, it was when there were some carriers that were actually accepting containers into Vietnam, you know, the turnaround time was probably on average, I'd say a good, I don't know, 5 days. There were certain things, you know, the letters of indemnity that were required from shippers, the letters of indemnity that were required from consignees. It was the scrutiny that these carriers were putting upon forwarding companies and direct BCOs, it was pretty intense. So those are some of the challenges that we are currently facing right now. There are some carriers that are actually better than others when it comes to turnaround time with bookings, but for the most part, I don't see things getting better with these carriers moving plastic scrap out of the United States into these locations. If anything, it's going to get worse and it's going to get more scrutinized, and that's what I'm seeing. And at the end here, you know, I just received an advisory from a large ocean carrier that's really expecting and wanting a lot of information in order to move this commodity these days. So if your primary focus is in plastic scrap, you know, expect it to get a little bit rockier and a little bit bumpier than what it currently is. And it's pretty bumpy right now. You know, my seatbelt is on, my team, their seatbelts are on, you know, my clients' seatbelts are on, because we really don't know what's gonna happen next and kind of where these markets are trending. But what I do know, like I said, right now for the past 6 months, a lot of this stuff from China, everybody decided to flood the market in Vietnam. Vietnam government, they didn't want this stuff there, and so now everybody's looking for new outlets, if they can even find an outlet or a country that's going to accept this stuff. So that's kind of the challenges that we're facing a little bit with the plastic scrap. Waste paper. Some of the locations I'm seeing this waste paper go right now is to India, Indonesia, Philippines, some Thailand. You know, there's not as many issues getting these bookings, but there's still current, you know, requirements that these carriers are wanting, you know, the letters of indemnity again. These carriers want to know that you are going to ship your container and pick up your container. That's basically what this boils down to, and I'm going to discuss that here after I discuss a little bit about metal scrap, kind of what's going on and what I'm seeing worldwide with some of this, some of the bigger issues that are going on. So, so metal scrap, you know, we were moving a lot of this aluminum into the southern China region, you know, and then just recently, the CODs that are coming across my operations desk right now, the CODs change of destinations it's incredible. I'd say probably 150 to 200 in the last few days alone of people scrambling to change the destinations where containers have been booked, they've been loaded, they've been on the rail, they've departed the United States, they're on vessels, they're almost reaching transship points. And so everybody's kind of scrambling to get this stuff changed. Well, that's an expensive proposition, but I think the alternative is it's like, well, who cares at this point, because the duty amounts are going to be astronomical. So let's move it elsewhere. So I'm starting to see COD fees around $350, $400 just for the COD. And you got restow fees. If this container's buried, then, you know, we got to move containers out from the carrier or from the vessel to get to that container, dig it out and make it available for a transship into Port Kelang or into Taiwan or into Hong Kong or wherever it needs to go. And these are costs that we all know that we're working on very slim margins to begin with. Now you add all of these additional costs on top of it, it's a struggle right now. And I'm sure you guys are feeling the effects of this thing. And that's why I'm saying, you know, this is a very pivotal point. You know, we're looking for emerging markets, we're looking for new places to ship this stuff. You know, I have set up personally in my company, you know, these lanes of traffic to offer options to my clients, because if I don't have these rates in place, this stuff gets on the water, it gets moving, things go sideways, we can't ship it elsewhere. This stuff ends up in China, the customer suffers paying astronomical duty amounts, or worse yet, the consignee backs away on that side, and then you're left with a stuck container that accrues demurrage and detention on a daily basis. So, those are the kind of things that I'm seeing with metal scrap right now. All of these things put together has also caused, these new emerging markets, what's also happened is vessel space. Everybody's trying to find these new emerging markets and trying to find new buyers and shipping to India and the Middle East and places like that. Well, the problem with that is you have these smaller vessels, for example, off the East Coast, on these Indomex, these IEX, these EC5 services that they're 6,500 TEU vessels. And when you're loading logs and lumber and metal scrap that are weighing 24, 25 metric tons, you're only going to be able to load a certain amount of containers before that vessel is weighted out. And this vessel starts to sink into, so they're not loading 6,500 T moving out, they're loading maybe 3,000 T tops. And so what we're seeing in the marketplace are major, major space crunches. And especially in the last 2 months, rate increases. The Middle East has taken, $300 a TEU off the East Coast and other locations. Miami and Houston have gone up $250 and $500. And so you're looking at those sorts of problems. When these new emerging markets come around, everybody tries to hop on it. Everybody tries to start moving their cargo there. Well, the next thing you know, these vessels fill up quickly. You can't get space. So, one of the good things about us is, we move such good volumes that we do have space allocations. So if you are running into problems, stop by. We have a booth down here, and we'll see what we can get done. But those are some of the other issues that we're going to be looking at. I think APL sent an email today about which is kind of surprising. They're taking $100 and $150 GRI to the Far East into Southeast Asia. I don't know. I talked to my guy today. He said, yeah, it's going to stick. So even the Far East rates are going up. This last topic that I'd like to discuss about is, I think it's kind of something that it's not really discussed too much. But in my opinion, it can really be the demise of the industry overall. And it's really getting a black eye, these commodities, I personally believe, as we progress through this stuff, as these restrictions are put in place, as the difficulties and the challenges are out there. And that is the issue of abandoned containers. There are thousands of these things sitting at ports right now, thousands of these. And the problem is people aren't picking them up. And they're wanting concessions. They want to go to the carriers, and there's a $50,000 demurrage invoice, and they're offering these carriers $200. And I talk to these carriers all week long. I talk to executives and trade managers at these carriers all day long and all week long. And they're a little fed up. They're a little fed up with the fact that these containers, and especially plastic scrap, as a forwarding company and as carriers, we get dragged into this by providing a service, and then this stuff arrives over there. Well, and the next thing you know, it's sitting for months on end. And then there's thousands of dollars in detention and demurrage. And everybody, and some of our clients, what they're doing is that they want to lift up the rug, and they want to sweep it under the rug, and they want to just see it go away. Well, it's not going away. There are equipment shortages here in the United States. Well, not picking up containers isn't helping any. So I think as a collective group, we really need to band together on this thing, because it is a problem. It is a very big problem. These containers are sitting, they're accruing storage daily, and there's vessels arriving daily. These containers are getting off, consignees are disappearing. And as a shipper, you are 100% responsible on that bill of lading if your consignee walks away. If they pay you for the goods, and if you give them original bills of lading, and they walk away, you are responsible. That means that whatever happens, it's coming after you. So I think everybody needs to be educated a little bit on that and how this is working. If you have clients out there, if you have buyers out there, that you're running into problems with this stuff, you know, I give my clients two options. You got to either pick it up or you return it back to the U.S. Now, these carriers have been working in a favorable sort of fashion with me. They are actually offering the same import rates back to the United States as they were the export rates that were going out. You know, so that in itself is a savings of a few $1,000s. But guys, I implore you, if you know that there is going to be a problem with this container arriving at destination, do not avoid the issue. Hit it head on. It may hit the pocketbook a little bit, but I'm telling you, the bad apples are spoiling the bunch for all of us who are out here trying to do the right thing. And if we continue to do the right thing, you know, we can really get into the view of because these carriers look at these commodities these days as, yeah, you know, I don't want to move this stuff because I'm fear of abandonment. And these containers sitting everywhere. So, you know, that's just kind of my 2 cents on that. Here's what's going to happen if we do not start picking up these containers. And these carriers are sending out these advisories on a daily basis on different lanes of traffic, okay? So bear with me, I'm gonna read this it won't take too long, but kind of read it a little bit in pieces here. It says, please note that in order to control the high volume of idling import shipments of scrap and waste paper products in Vietnam, TCIT has announced a new mandatory requirement for cargo to Cat Live via CIMEP. Now, this is just one string. There are many, many sorts of advisories going out like this, and these are fresh. It says, until further notice, imports of scrap and waste paper from CIMEP terminal to Cat Live port are subject to the following requirements. Effective immediately, prior to ocean vessel arrival, the CIMEP terminal requires the carrier to provide the consignee scrap import license. That's not a problem. Issued by the government of Vietnam, and the consignee schedule for picking up their scrap and waste shipments. They want the schedule. When are you guys going to grab this stuff? If the schedule to pick up is either not provided or not within the near future, the cargo will be held at CIMEP terminal for the account of the consignee. After May 14th, in addition to the presentation of the import license and schedule for picking up cargo, the consignee or their shipping agent representative is required to send a letter of commitment to receive to the terminal with the specific content stating your company name, is committed to receive goods within X amount of days from the day the ship berthed. This letter is to be delivered to the terminal prior to vessel arrival in CIMEP. Now it says upon arrival in Cat Live, in case the cargo is not picked up by the time stated in the letter of commitment, the cargo will be moved from Cat Live to an off-terminal storage depot at the consignee's expense. Now here's the big kicker. This next statement, what these carriers are doing, and like I said, if we continue to keep these containers intact and not picked up, here's what these carriers are probably going to start doing. For security purposes, a deposit of $3,000 per container will be collected from the shipper prior to vessel loading in North America. The security deposit is refundable to the shipper upon empty container return in Vietnam in clean, undamaged condition, and all demurrage and/or detention charges fully paid in Vietnam. Basically, they're wanting you to pay $3,000 a can to get a booking as a guarantee and insurance that you're going to pick up your box once it arrives over there. So, like I said, I think we all need to band together on this. We need to get back into the good graces of these carriers and demonstrate to them, hey, you know, we're here to play ball. We're doing the right thing. We're not just moving this stuff to get it out of here and just let it sit over there. That's not what we're about. So I'd just like to share that little bit of information with you guys, and I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Really appreciate that, Chad. Before I welcome Shen up there, can I just make a small announcement to our audience members that are listening through simultaneous translation? Of course, we make this available to you so you can understand it. We're getting some feedback up here for some folks that have the volume turned up too loudly. I understand you want to be able to hear the translation over the speaker, but it's actually a little bit distracting for us here and for your neighbors around you. So we ask if you could just turn it down a little bit so that it's not distracting. Thank you so much, Shen.
So, too many topics, too little time when we talk about China. I have about 10 minutes, so you guys can raise hand when I reach the 10 minutes. My name is Shen. I work for Omnisource a little bit over 10 years. It's a 100 subsidiary of Steel Dynamic. It happened in 2008. It is a great pleasure to be here today to talk about China. China is a big topic. It's a big country. It's a big world hot spot for the past 10, 15, 20 years. I believe many folks here, sitting here, probably done business with China, traveled to China. And so I did not bring any PowerPoint here, I'm sorry. I just thought I want to have a free speech with all of you guys, share a couple cents of my opinion with what's going on in China, what's probably gonna happen. So speaking of China, the rapid growth rate from China has created a tremendous scrap demand for the past 15 to 20 years. I'm sure most of your folks sitting here are somewhat doing business with China, in China, or something associated with China. The business trading was fairly easy. I would say for a certain degree, I want to say we're all somewhat spoiled by the past 10, 15, 20 years doing business with Chinese folks and the Chinese business partners. However, since mid of last year, when I was in Hong Kong, that was a bear in Hong Kong, we heard many changes coming out of China. So I would say for the past 10, 11 months, there were many actions, new policies, and the government efforts taken in China. The scrap market had really took a 180 turn. We learned many import licenses revoked by the government for many reasons, and many processing yards are closed in China, especially down in the southern part, because that's most of the Category 7 units are moving down to there. So many inbound containers are stuck in Hong Kong and any other transit port waiting for a license or quota to move into the final destination. But day is no longer the same. We all know everybody is kind of frustrated and struggling with the current situation. Many folks I spoke with since end of last year, they were all hoping the new license for 2018 should be renewed after Chinese New Year's. But as far as I know, probably there were over 90% import license did not get renewed. The limited amount of license got renewed with much smaller quota or volume compared with previous years. So today, if you go visit China in the southern port, you will see many scrap yards are empty or some are closed. And the traders are seeking the new market, new world, like what we mentioned earlier, go to Southeast Asia or any other new regions. Supposedly, as far as I know, is Category 7 will no longer be imported into China by the 2018. This is what I heard. So what is the further impact? Well, what I read was it was estimated 60 to 70% of China imports are falling into the Category 7. For the Guangdong area, there's over 80%. So you guys can kind of figure out the impact of these changes. Without new license, this kind of a business sector is kind of, if I may use the word, stopped in southern part of China. That not only directly impact all the folks in the business for many years, also indirectly changing the form of the scrap going to the furnace in China. Let me see. So what we probably also noticed for the last 7, 8, 9, 10 months, the scrap going to China has somewhat changing form from, say, insulated copper wire. Now you guys may hear someone will say a copper granulating chops or some other terms. So it's more like a furnace-ready type kind of units. It is a transformation as far as what I see, what happened in China. On the different nodes, I'm sure most of folks has learned the environmental issue in China. You know, people talk about sky, you read the news, you look at the pictures. So there was a cleaning up actions from China. Me, myself, I was born and raised in Beijing, so I remember what sky looks like 40 plus years ago. And now I look at it, I said, wow, that really looks different. So many friends of mine from school or neighbors are in different business sectors. When I was talking to them, here's what they said. They said, Shen, it is not just a scrap. This is cleaning up all business sectors. I'm talking about pretty much you can use the word all business sectors. The target is, the objective is mainly reduce the low efficiency and high pollution units from all business sectors. That's I borrowed the word from a friend of mine. We all know China is a big country. Cleaning up requires tremendous effort. Me, as being born and raised in Beijing, I'm hoping for the best of China. Going green, that's the big word. I do not believe going green was the original reason when the recycling business started years ago, but we all know it is definitely important, become more and more important every day in our everyday life, because you do not want your kid are drinking dirty water, has a polluted air, or anything to hurt our children or even ourselves. So I believe that's the reason why today we're all gathering here. Many folks I know here are in generations in this business. So we are all here share the experience, the passion, the technologies. It is for all of us. It's also for our children and also for our planet. What I see is 2017, somewhere I read a data is showing 32% of world copper consumption are coming from scrap. So to translate, that equivalent to roughly 400 million tons of carbon monoxide. So in my language, scrap is much cleaner than some other sourcing of scrap, especially if I can borrow the words copper. Going green is reduce the pollution, maximize the value of recyclable units. I don't want to touch too much on this sensitive subject. What's the waste and what's the scrap? There is a big difference. We all know that. That's why we're all here. We are 100% supporting going green with or without China. We are 100% supporting going green. We definitely want to see China here because China is a big country. It's a part of the global economy. Me, personally, I would like to see China or department or government, we're working with all of us to come up with some kind of a global standard, have the same understanding of what is the true, more realistic threshold on all different kind of scraps. On the positive notes, we all know, regardless of changes, China is still the largest, if I can say, maybe one of the largest scrap consumers, especially on the copper. China will not disappear from the scrap market. We all know that. It is what I see is they are going to the transformation stage into the new China form. Again, we see in the old days many different type of scrap going to China. Nowadays, with all the regulations, there are only limited type of scrap are allowed to go into China. So this to me is created a new window. This is a structure change, not only for China, that impact Omnisource, that impact North America, impact probably everybody sitting here. On the processing side, what I see is after China reducing the Category 7 scrap, many scrap owners or yards, they don't have much more choice but to looking for new regions. You know, we mentioned so many Southeast Asia countries are become to a new, I don't want to use the word a new hotspot, but there are going to be somewhere those units will be processed, either in States or in Canada or in Europe or in Southeast Asia. From A to Z, this is the life of this business. That's how my personal opinion. More and more, we all learn more and more Chinese scrap processors are bringing the technologies, the manpower, the investment, and the experience. Now are moving into the Southeast Asia region to continue the business. Myself, wishing for the best to all of them because this is a part of the business. They were telling me they were frustrated, got kicked out of the business, but they want to stay in the business, so they have to find a new place to be part of the team, to be part of the game, to be part of us. Omnisource I'm working for the past 10, 11 years. We're also seriously looking into these changes, not only from the marketing standpoint, but also the technology improvement. We believe this is for the better partnership with global recyclers and the consumers. The last note I want to say is the recycling is not a regional matter. It's not a Chinese matter or American or European matter. It is a global event. It is not a business. It's our everyday life. This is a small world. I really want to see all of us work together for the best for our children, our future, and our planet. Thank you.
Vinod, ready?
Hello, thank you for having me today. I'm going to speak a little closer to the ground from sort of the MRF perspective of what's been happening. To do that, I'm going to go back about 6 months. So Oregon was really sort of the alarm sounder of the problems, at least for the West Coast. And it actually took a while to convince local governments and state governments that there was a problem. There was California wasn't reporting it, Washington wasn't reporting it. So the first thing we had to do was really get local governments on board and explain the problem, explain that it was real, that it's here, that it's coming to all these other states. So Oregon has a disposal ban, so that was one of the things we had to explain, that there's a rising cost. Some of these rural, smaller counties aren't going to be able to afford to transport and pay processing costs for these materials before you reach the disposal ban or disposal price. On top of that, we don't know if we're going to be able to ship it even after we process it, because we are seeing markets go away for all the reasons that we heard here today. So that was really the first part, was just getting people on board and getting them to look at the policies and the regulations that we have in the state, so that we can move forward as cautious as we need to. And I think a lot of the things that we're doing are unfortunately also things that you may have heard already. So we've had to explore new markets. For us, it's not navigating the China market. It's really been finding other markets. So Southeast Asia has been a big reliant, and I'm talking mostly about mixed paper and plastic, because that's by huge volumes what we produce the most of. So as we moved our papers off to other locations, we didn't have the same ability with a lot of the plastics. What we've done now is we've looked at other domestic markets, and we've looked in Canadian markets. We don't want to just kick the can down the road, as it were. We want to make sure that the plastic's going someplace where it's going to be recovered. So we sort of ran into how do we make sure what we're shipping is what everybody's wanting, and that's getting to know the other markets, knowing what percentages, including moisture. So all our crew knows that if it exceeds a certain moisture contaminant or percentage, that it's a contaminant, and that can't go to some markets. So some markets aren't even open to us, just being that we're in Oregon. And it rains a lot there. So what are kinds of things we're doing? Is it's really exploring new markets. We're sending mixed scrap paper to mills that maybe didn't previously process that material. We're doing a lot of trial loads. We're sending materials all over the place. As you said, it's a mess. So we're sending 10 loads here, 10 loads there, loads to domestic mills, and if that's our goal, is to help see domestic growth on the West Coast. On the East Coast, there are some scrap paper mills, and there's places that can handle that. On the West Coast, we were reliant on the manufacturing hub that was China. We relied on the cheap freight over there and the consumption, and with that gone, it put us in a spot where, a couple of months ago, we were stockpiling and looking at disposal, safety concerns. We can't run a facility that's so full you can't drive a forklift down through it. So we're in a little different spot, and I'm talking a little more locally than these guys were, because that's where it comes. We're reliant on the shipping end, but we also don't want to put material on the water that's not what somebody's going to consume on the other end. So we're as MRFs, we're always looking to keep moving the game, and with all these problems, what's come good of it is that we're now discussing it more. You're hearing common themes of contamination reduction, working on changing programs, working with the local counties and program managers. We need to change programs and get materials out of there that don't have solid homes, that are getting lost in the materials. We're working with the communities to understand, hey, this is a cost that it's a global issue, and it's not something that's happening in Oregon or California or Connecticut. It's something that's happening everywhere, and that was the biggest message that we had to get people in order to change the policies and the programs that are in existence in our state. So the good things are we're having these conversations. We're addressing contamination. We're addressing, how do we bring new markets? How do we support possible mill development? How do we bring perfs out to the West? We're currently putting together a stakeholder group in Oregon to analyze how can we build a stronger system. We have a good system that's got us a long way over 30, 40 years in Oregon, but now we need to take it to the next spot. So how do we build stronger infrastructure for hauling, processing, and attract these markets? Because that's what we need to do, is attract the markets. We agree with Shen. We don't want to. We want to do what's right with the materials, and we want to find homes for them. And if we can do it domestically and make sure that it's all being handled properly and not disposed of, that's where we're at. So the things we're doing, again, are very common to other people. We're looking at capital expenditure. What do you do? What kind of equipment can we add? But what's the mix going to look like? So what's going to be in that mix? What's it going to settle on? And then we're doing the common, changing how we sort. Are we sorting different mixes? Are hard mixes selling differently than soft mixes? There's just so many little pieces that we're having to work with within the system that, I don't know where we're at yet. That's the problem, is we're kind of doing triage. We had this big collapse in November, December. Everything backed up, and right now we're sort of in this eye of the storm. I left our facility on Thursday, and and you wouldn't have thought there was a problem. We actually, our inventories were down, inbound and outbound. We're facing this push-pull, and until we have steady long-term markets, we're going to be up against that. So the MRFs are in a weird spot where we have this unending supply with this very limited demand, and if we can't get it into containers and have it go somewhere, or in trucks and go somewhere, we're in a very bad spot. So I don't have a lot of good news, unfortunately, but I think there's positives, and I think that we're gonna go forward, and we're gonna survive as an industry. I think we're a very resilient industry, and the fact that mills are trying new experiments, and equipment manufacturers are developing new items, and we're bringing more consumption to other areas is a good sign. So That's kind of all I have today. Thank you.
Shan.
Okay.
Good morning. I'd like to thank ISRI for inviting me to speak today. Thanks, Adina. Thanks to Brian, too, also. You know, as metal recyclers, this is really based on my opinion of what we're seeing in the export markets. You know, I can't begin to determine the current effect that the new requirements are having on paper and plastic recyclers, because we're not in that part of the business. My references are primarily in regards to metal scrap. While it's become clear that processing and recycling paper and plastic will see dramatic changes, both in the cost of the cycle and what percentage can be handled profitably moving forward. See if I can get it. You said hit it from the beginning?
Oops. Is that it? Is that the
That's
second
it.
slide? Yeah.
You got it. Very good. It's in an outline form. It's kind of simple. I don't think we need to make too much information. The biggest issues, in my opinion, are the new quality requirements, and we all know that. Quality improvements can only be accomplished incrementally by suppliers if China's expectations remain realistic. We all know that you cannot change metal scrap into new production material. The requirement for 0.5% limit for non-conforming materials can only be developed with clear and concise specifications. Identifying and listing the components for all the recyclable grades affected. Inspection teams at multiple ports must be clearly educated. And internal communication and agreements between AQSIQ, CCIC, and the central government would be the first step necessary to clarify and advance the inspection process. The numerous commodities affected create multiple variables that require challenging analysis. Determining realistic final conformance allowances is necessary if we expect to have the opportunity to continue exporting metal scrap and recyclables to China. The challenge for metal recyclers is to fit our material into a specification that they can all agree on. And currently, we know the challenge is that AQSIQ's pre-inspections and the at-port inspections are not matching. They're at odds. None of us want to load containers and ship them, have them accepted as pre-inspection, and then get there and be rejected. And as Chad has said, they're working hard to keep the return costs low, which is much different than it was previously. It used to be if you had to bring containers back, the cost to return containers from Southeast Asia was more mirrored to the cost of new production goods, whether it was clothing or chemicals or whatever they were sending. Generally, the cost to bring containers back could be 3 or 4 times the cost of shipping the containers to Southeast Asia or whatever your destination is. So obviously, they're focused on helping people and helping us to remember, sometimes your first loss is your best loss. To leave containers there and not have them picked up, you're not just ruining it for yourself or saving yourself money, you're ruining it for the rest of the people that depend on this business. What do I hit here, Dina? This one?
Just press the space bar.
Can you do it? Not that one.
You got it? Yeah, I think you can even just press the space bar too, to advance it.
This bar? Nope.
There we go. Down button.
Down one?
Oh, but it's not projected.
Nope.
I apologize. I don't know what the hell's going on.
It said,
Hang on.
got it?
I don't know. Oh, you know what? No, no. I have no idea. I'm going to go back for 1 second. I don't know.
Don't know. Or what if we do this? There we go.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Sorry. The logistical challenges relating to exporting scrap metal. Currently, general rate increases and proposed additional accessorial charges and changes of destinations affect the overall shipping cost. Per diem and free time requirements are crucial elements that can also reduce profitability significantly. Every scrapman in this room is well aware that the shipping expenses can and do easily exceed the profitability of multiple commodities. We all work on tonnages to make our living. We're making less money per container than the cost of shipping it. So that's why you have to really make sure you understand what these extra charges that might show up are. Equipment shortages are increasing the time it takes to get your bookings confirmed. It used to be you'd call to get a booking, you'd have it in hours. In the last 6 months, it's turned into days. And sometimes even then it's challenging with multiple requests, and it's many of the freight forwarders, not singling anyone out. Then the changes in the ERDs, which are the early return dates for containers, and changes in the cutoff dates can sabotage your container returns and add significantly to the cost of doing this business. We all know the other factor affecting everyone nationwide currently is recruiting qualified truck drivers has become almost impossible, with newly trained candidates quickly moving to the next opportunity. We've all brought in drivers, trained them, helped them get their CDL, and as soon as it's available, they're going to the next place. And I know it's not local to the southern United States. I hear it from everyone everywhere. Let's see if we can do this now. There you go. Everyone has already talked about the alternative markets. It's not all bad news, like we're talking about right here. We've been developing an export market for Class 7 electric motor scrap to Europe for the past 2.5 years. So there are options available. But as Omnisource has said, the amount of material going to China is so massive. You cannot expect to replace the thousands of tons going to go to any one location. And we're all going to have to adjust how we do this. The other part of the difficulty with doing the containers is the weight restrictions for the rail terminal returns, the road limits that can require and necessitate triaxle chassis upgrades, which add to the cost of doing this business when you're purchasing the material. Profitability will disappear without the expertise to recognize these challenges. If you have people that are new to doing this in your office or don't check on all of these extra issues, knowing what the net weight that you're allowed to load, knowing what the railroad is expecting you to put on your rail billing, knowing what weight you're going to put on your SOLAS, which is the newest requirement if you're going from the rail to the port. All these things have to be considered. You know, doing a rail billing even 6 months ago was not difficult. But I don't want to tell you today what you go through. If you're moving even a small amount of containers, and some of your companies are so large, they move hundreds, to try and get rail billings done with some of these steamship lines is like pulling teeth. They don't reply to you. They don't tell you if it's approved. You literally have to call the Norfolk Southern or the CSX to find out if the rail billing's been accepted. And all this has taken time, and all this time costs money. So when you start to change your destinations. It's important to know and understand what all these pop-up charges could be, because the profitability is small. All of a sudden, you have to pay another $150 for a triaxle chassis. All of a sudden, the ERD changes. You pick the container up on Monday for a Wednesday ERD. They change it to Friday. Now you've got demurrage time on your containers. The next thing you know, you got a bill from the steamship line. 30 days later, you kept the container, you kept the chassis for 2 extra days. It's another $200. Now you'd spend $350 on a container. If you're lucky, you're making $500 to $1,000. Where are you going? You really, really have to be careful, and you have to watch these markets. We know the alternative markets. Let's see if we can go next. Conclusion. Here we go. Well, you already heard about the paper and plastic. The markets are redefined, with municipal recycling expecting dramatic changes and cost increases. Private firms cannot expect stockholders to accept unsustainable losses, and this will add to the cost that must be borne by the public to keep recycling levels high until alternative uses are identified. You know, there's so many parts of this country where people want to, oh, we recycle 100%. We want all the paper out. We want all the plastic out. As a fourth-generation scrap metal recycler, we recycle so much material, all of us in this room, more than counties, more than states. You know, it's a lot. But you can't have a portion of the public expecting that we can continue shipping material that doesn't meet a quality requirement, and you can't expect private companies to run MRFs that are going to have to pay to get rid of material. If some portion goes to a landfill or can't go to China or can't go to Vietnam, the public has to endure the cost. And people have to wake up and accept the fact that some of this material, it's going to cost money to have disposed of. It's a fact with these changes. Industrial and commercially generated materials in the plastic and paper sector can be more easily improve the processing and sorting procedures, and will meet the higher quality objectives and sorting procedures. So you know, the guys that are shipping the commercial grades of the plastics and the office paper and the clean paper, they're not going to go through that problem that the people with the municipally recycled plastic is going to be. Of course, I've been doing electric motors my whole life. I learned it from my father and grandfather. I did it in China for years, and today I do it in Europe. You know, we've seen a big shift in destinations, and we've got Europe. We now have Pakistan that's looking for material, and I believe we can expect some percentage of domestic processing to increase accordingly. The markets will change. There will be some domestic business of this type also. When you talk about the insulated number 2 and the low-grade wire, less than 50% recovery, there are domestic consumers that are making changes to their current systems to add these grades. But it's very important to note that processing lower yield material does increase the time required and the maintenance cost. And we should, as suppliers, expect higher processing charge for these lower grades. This translates to lower value for the dealers and suppliers. Significant value reductions take some time to be accepted by the market. But these destination consumer changes will find levels that everyone can live with. We all know that we need to process and move this material. I believe that the higher grades of copper, with the elimination of the acceptance of the low grades by China, should see a significant increase in their appetite for number 1 and number 2 copper. This material is an essential requirement for the producers of multiple products. These companies in China have countless employees that depend on their jobs, and it requires a stable platform that's a fundamental condition in keeping the Chinese economy functioning. I think what we really need to think about as an organization, as scrap suppliers for export is that the message that we should be sending is we do feel that our material is recyclable, not waste, number one, as Adina said. And number two, you must have reasonable and realistic expectations of what you expect from a scrap product. If an electric motor is in a factory for 5 years running, then you put it in a container with other motors and you ship it 10,000 miles, there's dust inside of a motor. It's going to shake out. If in China they're expecting there to be less than 200 pounds of fines in a load of recycled electric motors, that cannot happen. We don't wash them. We don't have to add dirt to them. There's in here at least a little bit of dirt or dust or other material in there. Until the Chinese can say to us, this is what we don't want, this is what's acceptable, then we can actually make a plan of how to be successful and continue to do what we enjoy doing so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Steve. And on that last point, that is certainly something that we continue to try to get those answers. It's been a bit of a challenge. Okay, we have a little bit of time for Q&A. I am mindful that we are both approaching lunchtime and also other really important sessions that you need to attend. So if you do have questions, let's just keep it, just keep it to a question, and you can address it to a specific speaker or everybody. Raise your hand, and we have a microphone. If anybody has a question, here in the front row. Might be hard to see.
I'm a little bit confused. Both Chad and, sorry, my name is Ranjit Baxi. I'm the president of BIR. Both Chad and Steve have been very happily telling us GRI is coming, very happily telling us if you don't do this, you accept 150, you accept 250. What I think the industry is lacking is people like you to be our ambassadors to go and convey the message of shipping line that what they're asking is really not workable. My question is very simple. I see about 8,000 containers to 9,000 containers volume of business missing because of all the post-consumer plastic and the mixed waste and things being banned. So this 9,000 containers will not be replaced by unit increase in demand from India or Pakistan or Vietnam. We might be able to ship 3,000 tons there. We still have 6,000 containers missing a week, which means 20,000 TEU ship going empty every fortnight. How can the shipping line sustain this business by just continually putting up the prices and making it uneconomical for us as business people to make the export worthwhile? So I think somebody should go to the lines and tell it should be decreasing, not increasing the sea freight. I mean, I don't know what your comments are.
Well, I think it was maybe a couple years ago, for example, East Coast into Pakistan, Navashiva, Mundra. I mean, those 20-foot rates were moving probably around $1,000, or $1,200. And then, the market just fell off on this thing to a point where at one time, just recently, I think in January, I mean, the ocean freight rates were $300, $350. And we all saw what happened to Hanjin, right? And so these carriers could not sustain those levels and turn a profit. Now, it is absolutely mandatory, and it's what I do all day long, is I work with these shipping companies to negotiate rates. I work with them based on the volumes that we move. I work with them based on what they're requiring and what their needs are. If they have surplus of equipment in certain locations, I'm working with them to get equipment moved. But I just, in my own personal opinion, what I've seen, the rates fell off the table. And so I think getting back to a level where these carriers can be profitable, I mean, we rely on these carriers. I mean, if there's no carriers, we're not gonna move any cargo, plain and simple. So for these guys to raise the rates the way that they have, I for one kind of agree with the carriers. I think that these levels needed to be up to a point where they can sustain profitability and make money, which is what they have said that they haven't made money in recent years. But I think some of them are kind of turning around. So that's kind of I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Anybody else? No other questions? I think I hear lots of stomachs grumbling for
Yeah.
lunch. All right, so please join me in thanking Chad, Shen, Vinod, and Steve for their time and sharing their expertise with you. Yes.